in media was dealing with the press. The press is always one-sided. And each press publication is funded and streamlined through a different source. So if a liberal, for example, wants to financially support some form of publication, then that publication is going to have liberal-based stories or conservative-based stories, depending on who did it. One of the challenges that I've had, or that I've made, is being a part of the Washington Times group. I was able to not only promote more urban issues, but to paint the picture of those urban issues in a different light. And I'll give you an example. When you read the press can either be your best friend or your worst nightmare. But the advantage is that when you paint it, typically, whether it's the New York Times, the New York Post, the Washington Times, or the Washington Post, when you have issues pertaining to young African-American males or females, the headline tends to be very negative. In my tenure, being that I'm one of the few urban African-American voices from Detroit, one of the things that I've done is always challenge the simple headlines of the story. And I'll give you an example. One of the things that they do, when you read a publication, whether it's online, whether it's in the newspaper, people put attractive or sexy headlines to sell papers. The story may not necessarily be about whatever it is you're reading, but they'll put a challenging headline, negative or positive, so that you'll read it. So one of the things that I've been able to do is curtail those images, because I understand that when you read a publication, 80% of Americans don't necessarily read the content of the article. They read the headlines. And then they make their judgment based on that headlines. So my advocacy, being an African American who is from Detroit, grew up in poverty, grew up on Section 8, and I lived through the challenges of welfare. So I understand that we can't allow ourselves to be painted in a negative light. And so one of the things I've always done is always challenge negative articles that put us in a different light. And you know what I'm talking about. And I think that that's important, because that's one less publication that continues to stereotype us negatively, falsely. And I think that it's those type of challenges that, and each one of us deal with this in our respective fields. But I think through the press, it's always been interesting, because communication is key. And the first line, when you're talking about marketing or communicating an idea of advocacy, the first line, if you will, is that communications piece. It's the marketing piece. It's the fact that you can't have an issue unless people actually know what the issue is. And based on how the issue is defined and how the issue is articulated, that can literally change the decision of any issue that's out there, whether it's transportation, education, crime, or whatever.
So I'm from New York. I'm from Hollis, Queens, in New York, and grew up in a single-parent household. It was just my mom who raised me and my little sister. One of the things that I really, and same as all the other panelists have spoken, Hollis, rough neighborhood. Growing up in a rough neighborhood, there were a lot of single-parent homes. There weren't a male figure in the house. And so as a young man or a boy, to have somebody to look up to have somebody who's to teach me right from wrong, in a male perspective, was kind of difficult, because there were none in the neighborhood and none in the household. So one thing that I did was I went back to my elementary school and started a 6-week a young man mentorship program from Boys to Men. And it's from grade 6 through 8th grade. I take all the young men, and we have a Saturday session, 6 Saturday sessions, where we have a specific focus topic for each Saturday. So the first Saturday, we're talking about financial literacy. The second Saturday, we're talking about etiquette, how to take a lady out on the date, how to dress, how to carry yourself. The next one, I have, and these all have guest speakers who come in as well as input. The next one is walking in the street, having police officers come in and talk about your rights as a young black male in the streets of New York and what that means and how to carry yourself. The reason why I did that is because I realized what I didn't have growing up, and I could complain, I could say, you know what, no one was there for me, you guys gotta figure it out. But instead of complaining or being part of that whole cycle of just bad-mouthing, complaint, I decided to be part of the solution and empowering the young men so that when they do go to high school, they remember these things, and then they also empower the people around them and say, you know what, you may not have a father in the home, but look to somebody who's doing something positive in your community, or somebody who's doing something positive in your church or in your school, and use them as your mentor or as your launch pad to where you want to go. Because what's going on at home should never be a barrier to what it is that you want to accomplish. And always remind yourself that.
As I said, I ran for the school board a couple of years ago, and when I remember when I was younger in high school, my teacher telling us that we should be going to our Board of Education to tell them to buy a brand new book because these books were falling apart. And as a kid, I was just like, who cares, I don't know what the Board of Education is. Our books were falling apart. It just really wasn't, it didn't click with me. And I'll never forget, it was a social studies class, and my teacher was there. And when I got older, I said, got to college, and I started looking, I was like, wow, I can't believe we had our books that were falling apart in school. I was like, why didn't somebody buy us any brand new books? And the more, when I came back and I graduated, I started looking at it, I realized that there were a bunch of people who are on the Board of Education, which is a board that makes all the decisions in the school, from what food you were eating, what buildings were going to be built, teachers are going to be hired, everything. Because New Jersey is set up that the school systems are funded by the taxes based on home ownership, that people would hold on to the money so that they don't pay a dime. That means no new books for kids because they didn't want their taxes to go up. But what happens is you end up having a bunch of kids that are not competitive when they graduate. And I just thought that was so, be nice, unfair. And I said I was going to run for the Board of Education. And when I decided to run, there were a lot of people who told me, don't. Politics involved, X, Y, Z, and they indirectly threatened me and all this other stuff. But you know what? I saw the bigger picture. I said, if I was an opportunity to give kids new books and give them whatever resources they could, I would. And I put my team together, and I ran a crazy election, 11 people running for a few positions, and I won. I was the #1 top vote getter, and I was the youngest person elected on the school board in the county. And when I got on there, the first thing I did was to make sure everyone received brand new books. Not only that, I made sure that I was holding people that traditionally would just do their job accountable, making sure that people had opportunities to scholarships, making sure that our coaches were helping kids get athletic scholarships, were building those gaps in terms of student achievement. I was just trying to do things differently because I just felt that we had a bunch of people who just didn't care. And that was my passion. That was my desire. That was my frustration, to go to college and not know, not how struggling in my reading and my writing and looking at what we could have been doing differently. I had to reteach myself over in college. I had new classes, tutors, and studying in the library all along to work on skills that I wasn't prepared in high school and in middle school. And so I said, if I could do anything in my part, controlling a $50 million budget, I said, we're going to make it happen. And that's what I'm doing.
When I was around you all's age, which wasn't that long ago, my parents moved my sisters and I from the city schools to a county school. And when they did that, the dynamics changed within the schools. We were then a minority. It was about, I'll say, 2 or 3 blacks per classroom. And the white students made it known they let us know that the majority ruled. Almost every day I was called the N-word, which NAACP has spent a lot of money to bury, so I wouldn't even speak that word. We were the second black family to move into our neighborhood, and our neighbors' children decided that that was not acceptable. I remember we were sleeping in our house one Halloween night. We heard a thud on the roof. Somebody took a wad of paper, lit it on fire in an attempt, I guess, to try to burn down the house and threw it on top of the roof. They tore down our mailboxes. They did. I had to fight almost every day. If I wasn't suspended, when I returned from suspension, I had to fight because the white boys wanted to test the black guy. So it got to a point where every time I went to the office, it was Hughes boys' fault. So I had to figure out a way how to change that around. So it was no longer just the Hughes boys' fault. So then I had to get smart about how I dealt with situations. And I remember one day, one of my classmates called me the N-word for the last time, and I went to the principal. His name was Mr. Early. And I told him, I said, normally I would have said something, I would have done something to him. But if it had been any other one of my friends, they would have definitely done something to him. But I'm bringing it to your attention now so that you can try to do something yourself. And he said to me there was nothing he could do because it was freedom of speech. So what I did is I decided to learn how to adapt to trying to come up with different ways. To one, since I was always the one that was pointed out as the person that was pushing the envelope with everybody else, I decided to just spend time in the library and read. And when I graduated from high school, an opportunity was given to me where I was able to join the NAACP, and I joined the NAACP. And at that time, we did not have a youth council, so therefore, I became the youth advisor for the NAACP. And I would talk to kids, and I would talk to my youth members about the stuff that I went through, but in essence, they were going through as well. And we found ways throughout the community to raise awareness, to keep future children from having to go through what I went through. Now, the sad part is this, because I tell this story and I tell people, this was back in 98, 99, when this happened. So it lets you know that racism and everything still exists in today's time, as we see now in 2008 and above, what our president has gone through. It's very prevalent. Racism has changed the face, or they changed the sheets. Some people put on suits and they put on a grin, but it's still in your face. And I want to make sure that young people do not have to take that, and they understand that they are big, they are somebody, and nobody should be able to put you in a position where you feel less than, but you are, I'm not even going to say equal to, because some of you have or can be greater than and become some of our greatest. So that's why I became an advocate.
So, where did you live at when you moved to the White neighborhood?
I live
Was
in
it downtown?
Danville, Virginia, which is the last standing Confederacy, last standing capital of the Confederacy, and we had a lot of civil rights activity back in Danville, but that's where it was. I moved from Danville, Virginia to Pennsylvania County.
So we have just a couple of minutes left, and I would like at least just one or two of you to just speak to helping children, and particularly there's a lot of females in here,
Exactly.
find
All
their
men
struggle,
panelists,
engage in that
but I won't say
struggle,
anything.
and overcome any of the challenges that race or gender may bring forth. All right. One or two of you. Okay.
What I want to tell, I'm also a professor. I teach at a university. I teach communications. And I tell the ladies that this world unfairly judges a whole lot of people, but you guys need to make sure your stuff is tight. All right? That means when you're shaking people's hands, you can't do that little, I'm trying to be cute. Let cute be acceptable later. You want people to respect you off the back. The way you speak, that needs to be key. You can't just be talking, it's not your friend. You need to gain people's respect. People judge you on how you speak, how you look, how you engage them. And as black women and minorities, you are already judged very toughly. And all I'm saying